ever since we re-began after Simchas Torah and having the Simchas Torah war. We're going to start off with tzedakah. Everyone should please take either a coin or a bill or an app on your phone, which also has tzedakah to put the coin in the pushka. Put it this way. Coin and dollar in the pushka, and we will say 2 chapters of Tehillim in the merit of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. First chapter 20. Lam Natsayah Mizmor LeDavid Anchadina B'Yem Sarai Sagav Chashem Elehei Yaakov Yishlach Ezrecha Mikodesh Umitzion Yisadeka Yizkar Kol Min Chasecha Vaylas Vayadash Nesela Yitain Lecha Chilavecha V'Chalatzascha Yimalei Niranan Abishuasecha Uv'Shem Eloheinu Nidgar Limal Yadinoi Kol Mishalisecha Ata Yadati Ki Yeshia Adonai Mashiachai Yanei Umishmei Katshay B'Gvurais Yesha Yeminoi Eile V'Rechev Eile V'Asusim V'Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir Hema Karu V'Nafalu V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Anisaydad Adonai Yeshia Melech Yaneinu V'Yahim Kareinu. And say the last chapter of Tehillim, the niggin of victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah V'Kadshay, hallelujah B'Chia Uzai, hallelujah B'Gvuraisav, hallelujah Karev Gudlai, hallelujah B'Seika Shofar, hallelujah B'Nevel V'Chinar, hallelujah B'Seifu Machal, hallelujah B'Minim V'Ugal, hallelujah B'Tzil Tzilei Shama, hallelujah B'Tzil Tzilei Tzirua, Kol Hanin Shama, hallelujah, hallelujah. Either a Gemara in front of you. If you have an art scroll Gemara, you should be the Gemara Mesechta Megillah 18b2, the very bottom of that page. So today, hopefully, we'll cover several different topics in the Gemara. The Gemara now continues going through our Mishnah part by part. The Mishnah that we learned in the beginning of this chapter and explaining it piece by piece. Until now, we explained and we elaborated and brought the halacha. What if somebody makes a pause in the Megillah and a long break, an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour break, and we analyze that, Sadu halachas like, what Rav Maina, Rav Shmuel, different versions. And now, in halacha we paskin that if you made even a large break, even if one spoke in between, it says in halacha, you could still fulfill your obligation of Megillah if you heard half in the morning and half in the evening. Best to do it all at once, of course. Now we're going to speak about, this is actually one of the differences between a Megillah and a Sefer Torah. If a Sefer Torah is missing a word or a letter, the Sefer Torah is puzzle. Your mezuzahs, your tefillin, of course, you know that if a word is written and it's puzzle, it's invalid. It invalidates entire tefillin or mezuzahs. There's many stories about people who the Rebbe told them to check their tefillin, and there was a blemish in the word levadecha, your heart, and they had a heart problem. Many, many different stories of that sort. A Megillah is different. Megillah does not need the level of accuracy of even though it's written on parchment and we read it and we make a bracha on it, it does not need the level of accuracy of a Sefer Torah, or for sure, even the accuracy of tefillin and mezuzahs, which need even more accuracy than a Sefer Torah. And the big difference is that a Sefer Torah is called a Sefer, a book. When you publish a book, you got to make sure it's accurate. Otherwise, people are going to catch you on your mistakes. A sefer, by definition, has to be exact to the extent that there's discrepancies in, if someone wrote the wrong number of crowns on letters in the Sefer Torah, it can make big problems in the Sefer Torah. For sure, if a letter is different and so on. By a Megillah, you have a Megillah which is many mistakes in it. It could be missing letters, it could be missing words, You can have words that are written puzzle, invalid, and the Megillah is still kosher. You're still allowed to read it from the Megillah. You can be missing whole psukim, whole verses from the Megillah. And you can still read from the Megillah and read some of it by heart. And the main reason is because if you look at the text of the Megillah is called an igeres, a letter. I'll bring it up on the screen. It's been so long since we actually looked at some of the psukim of the Megillah. The Megillah is called an igeres, a letter. Esther, the daughter of Abichail, and Mordechai, the Jew, wrote down the second Purim letter. Igeres Purim Hazois. The custom when you say the Megillah, when you read the Megillah, you pick up the Megillah and shake it by the words Igeres, this letter. It has the word Igeres a second time. When we read the Megillah, unlike a Sefer Torah, which has Atzechayim, poles at the end, Megillah does not. When we read the Megillah in Shul, we fold it up like an Igeres, like a letter. Because of that, since the Megillah is called a letter, when somebody writes a letter to their friend or to their fellow, it does not have the same level of attention as someone writing a sefer, as writing a book. A letter is written usually to one person, maybe a group of people. A sefer, a book, is like a sefer Torah, which has to be exact. So therefore, if there are mistakes in the Megillah, it's fine. It's not. It's still kosher to read from. If it's missing a few words, a few letters, a few psukim, not in the beginning and the end, but in the middle of the Megillah, it's still kosher to read from, because I think a letter does not necessitate the same level of accuracy as a sefer, as a book, a sefer Torah, or tefillin, and mezuzos.
Sometimes you can make a mistake. I work in a place where every interview, every phone call, everything had to be written up.
Yeah.
And if you made a mistake, you're not allowed to erase. You put a line through it, and you write error and your initials. One of my daughters told me, Ty, you wrote me a letter, you crossed out all the words and put error and but initials.
You're used to doing that.
The not part of Tanakh.
Yeah.
Not the Torah. The Nevi'im and Chuvim.
Yeah.
If you leave out, they under the same stringency as the Torah.
Generally, yes. They're also in the sefer, a book. But the Megillah is an exception, because Megillah is called an igeres, a letter.
So I think it's another thing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but since actually not everybody has to be in shul, we read actually Haftarah from. I'm sorry. We read actually, let's say, whatever.
Yeah.
Scroll. Instead, actually, you can read it from the paper.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if you have it actually wrongly written in actually the scroll, it would still be good.
Correct.
A bigger question would be as far as the Book of Esther, and so it's a finished order, because
Right.
Book of Esther, everybody says you have to read from the scroll.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
You have to read it from a scroll. If a scroll is not 100%, it's 95%, you're fine. As a matter of fact, I remember Baruch Hyman al Shalom, he had a very unique Megillah. I've never seen anything like it, which he had written on the Megillah in pencil, all the Nekudas, maybe the Trup too. I think just the Nekudas, of all the words, not written in ink, because then you're adding, but written in pencil, which you could erase, and it was a kosher Megillah.
Wow.
Taner Rabbanan, our sages have taught, if you have a regular Gemara, it's about halfway through the narrow lines. And
Now,
if you
I feel like you should have actually the Megillah fixed, though, right?
again,
Am I right?
if there's something invalid, you should definitely get it fixed. Because if the majority is puzzle, it's not good. And of course, we're talking about b'diavad, after the fact. To begin with, it should definitely done in the best way. To begin with, one should hear the Megillah at one shot.
Yeah.
If you did interrupt, you're yetsing. Taner Rabbanan, our sages have taught in a brisa. Is one more article here if anybody wants. Hishmid Baha Sofer, Osis Psukin. If Sofer was writing down the Megillah and he skipped by mistake a few words or a few psukim, a few verses or a few words in the Megillah. Ukra'an hakoirei. Now, listening to the Megillah, you have to hear every word. The Balkarei, the one who read the Megillah out loud, he read the entire Megillah, including those missing psukim, those missing verses, those missing words. Kimiturgaman hamitargim. And like a translator translating the Megillah. A translator, when he translates something, a lot of times he has to put it in his own words, his own context. And he says words that are not in the original text. The custom used to be, back in the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, that there was the Balkari, the one who would read the Torah and Shul, would have a mitargim, somebody who would say it out loud. Or, before the days of microphones, they used to have human microphones. So a chacham, a Torah sage, would give a speech, would give a class, and he would stop after every sentence. And then the mitargim, he was called the translator, who would repeat out loud what the sage said. But at times, he would put a little bit context into what the sage said. So he would add words that were not in the original saying of the chacham, of the sage, or the one in the shul would add words that were not in the Torah when translating after the Balkari. The Balkari would read a verse, and the translator would retranslate it into Aramaic, plus add a few words of explanation.
Okay, where our that's in English, we'll be having actually in parentheses or
Correct.
brackets, whatever. But like actually that I mean, it's not actually words, but it's different context.
Correct. Nowadays, you have printed chumashim, enough for everybody, and people could read along in the chumash, which has context. But absent of that, and people did not know, in general, the Am Haaretz, the average layman was not fluent in Torah or even Hebrew, so they would have a translator that they could understand what's being read in shul, or what the chacham, what the sage is saying in his drasha, in his speech. So just as a translator adds words, the Balkari over here, the one reading the Megillah in shul, in public, read the Megillah in its entirety, and he added on a pasuk that was missing. There was a verse missing in the written Megillah, and he finished it. He inserted it. So he inserted the missing piece. Yatsa, he has fulfilled his obligation. You're Yatsa hearing the Megillah. Says the Gemara. They ask a question on this premise that you can read some of the Megillah by heart. A brisa is teachings from the times of the authors of the Mishnah of Tanaim, which did not make it into the Mishnayos of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the Mishnah as we know it. But they're still teachings of Tanaim. So they have the level of power, sanctity as a teachings of the Tanaim, but they don't have the level of diuk, of it being exact as an actual Mishnah. But they ask a question from a brisa on this brisa we just taught, that if one read parts of the Megillah by heart, because it was not written down, you are yotzi, fulfilled your obligation. The brisa states like this, brisa on Megillah. If when one is reading the Megillah and you have letters that are blurry, or were torn, I'm sure you've seen it. You know, you ever have I've seen it myself. I'm saying a waterlogged mezuzah. There's a mezuzah which was kept outdoors, but not in an outdoor case. And the sefer was, when it was brought into check, basically there's a crack along the whole edges of the mezuzah case, where it's meant to easily to snap on and off. The outdoor case does not have that; it only has from the bottom a plug, which is waterproof. But over the years, moisture got into the mezuzah, and many of the letters were cracked, and many of the letters were blurry as well. So if one has a mezuzah, a Megillah, which the letters are blurry, or even if the letters are torn, the parchment was torn. Im nishuman nikar ksheira. If you can tell the imprint of the letters, you can tell the letters were there. So true, the letters of the Megillah that you have it now would not be kosher letters per se. It would invalidate a mezuzah and a tefillin and a Torah. However, for a Megillah, it does not invalidate it, as long as you can tell the trace of the letters. If the impression is, if the letters are still somewhat legible, it's fine. The imlav, psula, and if the letters are not legible, the Megillah is invalid, because a letter which is not legible is considered to be as if the letter is not there. And therefore, the Megillah is considered to be a Megillah chasera, a Megillah which is missing, lacking. And this Brisa stated that a Megillah which is lacking is puzzle, it's invalid.
Oh,
This goes exactly the opposite of what we learned in the previous Brisa, just 2 lines before. That if you're missing psukim, you're missing words or verses or letters, you could still fulfill, you could still be Yotzei the Megillah, as long as the Bakir read it out loud. And the previous Brisa said you could read by heart psukim and parts of the Megillah. So how do these 2 Brisas fit with each other? It's a contradiction. One says if you're missing anything from the Megillah is invalid. And one says you can even read some parts of the Megillah by heart, and it's still valid. Answers the Gemara, Loi Kashya. This is not a difficulty, it's not a contradiction. We just have to give a context to each Brisa. This second Brisa, which stated that if the Megillah is missing any words, or if the Megillah is missing words and the words are not legible, then the Megillah is invalid bechula, where that is speaking about if the entire Megillah is illegible, or if the entire Megillah is missing. So in that case, you're not Yotzei that Megillah is invalid. The first Brisa, which stated that if the letters were missing and you could read it by heart and you're still Yotzei, bimiktsasa, is referring to where the only part of the Megillah is illegible, or part of the Megillah is missing words. So if the Megillah, which part means, and we're going to have later on soon in the Gemara, part means less than half. If less than half of the Megillah is illegible or missing, so then you could still read the rest of the Megillah, or puzzle. But if more than half of the Megillah is legible or missing, or the words are puzzle, then the Megillah is invalid. We're going to have a little bit later on this Amud, and another context of the Gemara being of the ruling being put on is that if the missing pasuk is in the beginning of the Megillah until Yehudi, or at the end of the Megillah, it also invalidates the Megillah. So if the Megillah is missing less than a majority, less than half, and it's in the middle of the Megillah, so then the Megillah would be valid. If it's missing a little bit, a full pasuk from the beginning, a full pasuk from the end, or a complete paragraph goes on as well, according to the Ram, so then the Megillah would be invalid. Now, one who's reading the Megillah Bakare, and he's reading and he finds a puzzle word, he can continue reading, and everyone is going to say everyone fulfills their obligation. If there's missing a word or a pasuk, he has to read those words or psukim from memory. He has to put it in. But unlike so when you get an aliyah from the Torah, where you're not allowed to read from memory, you have to read it from inside. In Megillah, you are allowed to read from memory as well. If the letters were blurry or missing, but you could still recognize they're legible, then Megillah is completely kosher. What is considered to be a majority of Megillah? We said roiv. It doesn't actually mean roiv of the letters. It goes by the words. So a word could have 5 letters. The longest word in Tanakh is actually in the Megillah V'achshtarpanim, the longest word in Tanakh, as far as I understand. And if one letter in the word is invalid, so then it goes that word is considered to be a puzzle word, an invalid word. And then you go according to the majority of words in the Megillah. Are the majority of words written in a kosher way, or the majority of words written in an unkosher way? It doesn't go by the majority of letters in the Megillah, it goes by the majority of words. So even if the majority of letters in the Megillah are kosher, but the majority of the words have one invalid letter inside, so then the Megillah is also invalid. Right, let's continue on in the Megillah, in the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, our sages have taught in a brisa. Hishmit b'hakoyrei, pasuk echad. If when the Balkairi reading the Megillah skipped one pasuk, or somebody hearing the Megillah also didn't hear one pasuk, one verse. Lo yomer, you should not say, Ekres kula, I will continue to read the entire Megillah. V'yachar kach ekra ose pasuk, and then I will read that verse later on. Like, for example, let's say I'm in chapter 7 of the Megillah, and I realized I skipped a verse, a pasuk in chapter 2. You have to go back to chapter 2 and read from there. You can't say, let me finish the Megillah, I'm so far, and then at the end I'll add that pasuk. That you can't do. Rabbi Schusterman, maybe he said a story once that there's in chapter 2 or chapter 3 of the Megillah, there's a word which is written one way. It's written bi'amram, and you have to read it with a chaf. The kri is ki amram. Bi'amram is they said, and ki amram is when they said. So there's a difference in the way it's written and the way it's read. And that's near the beginning of the Megillah. It's in the 3rd chapter of the Megillah. And they were holding, him and a whole group of people were listening to the Megillah. And the Balkari was already holding chapter 8, closer to the end of the Megillah, when somebody realized that they made a mistake. The Balkari made a mistake. Instead of saying the word ki amaram, he said it the way it's written. He just read it from the Megillah and said bi amaram. So the Balkari, the Torah, the one reading the Megillah, had to go back now to chapter 3 and continue from there. None of them were too happy about it, that they only realized it when he's holding so late in the Megillah. So you can't say, I made a mistake in the earlier part of the Megillah, and let me finish the rest of the Megillah, and at the end, I'll go back and just repeat that one verse. You can't do that. It has to be said in order, similar to Shemoneh Esrei. Right? One makes a mistake in Shemoneh Esrei, you go back to the bracha where that mistake was and continue, and you don't finish and then say that one pasuk, because Mazel Tov. As we learned earlier, there's an order to all the psukim, order to all the blessings in Shemoneh Esrei. So too the Megillah must be read in order. Elakoidei, rather, he must go back and read. Go back to that verse which he skipped or made the mistake while reading, and finish the Megillah and proceed from there to the end. Nichnas leves hakneses. If somebody entered a shul, umatzat tzibor shakaru chatzia, and he found that the minyan is up to the middle of the Megillah. He came late to shul for whatever reason. I'm sure he must have been doing important things. And now he found that they already read half of the Megillah. So lo yomer, he cannot say to himself, Ekra chatzia metzibor, let me hear the second half of the Megillah with everybody else. The achakach ekra chatzia, and then I will go back and read the first half for myself. Rather, he must read it in order from beginning to end. They're essentially saying the same thing, the first half of this brisa and second half, that you have to read the Megillah in order. However, the second half adds on something even more uniqueness, a chiddush, a novelty. Because one of the most integral parts of reading the Megillah is Pesumei Nisa, publicizing the miracle of Purim. So if a person comes into shul and the main minyan is now halfway into the Megillah, you might think to myself, since it's so important to publicize a miracle, hear the Megillah with as big of a crowd as possible, let me hear the Megillah from the middle now to the end, and then afterwards I could say by myself the first half, rather than me saying the entire Megillah by myself, which then there's no Pesumei Nisa, there's no publicizing of the miracle because I'm reading it by myself. Even then, it's more important to hear the entire Megillah in order then to have the Megillah with a crowd, with a rabbin. And it's many times people think it's more important for me to go to shul, daven in shul, in a binyan, even if it means, let's say I'll drive there on Shabbos, as opposed to me davening at home. It's not the same. So there are times when it's a mitzvah to do things in public, do things with a crowd, to publicize a miracle, to sanctify Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. But there are times when Hashem wants us to do it differently. And hearing the Megillah in order is one of those examples. That's more important to hear the Megillah in order, in sequence, even if it's coming at the expense of Pesumei Nisa, of publicizing the miracle by reading it with a large crowd. The halacha, because of this, and these two Gemaras we just learned, and one other Gemara which we're going to have a little bit later on this Amud, the preferred method of the Megillah, of hearing the Megillah, is that one should hear the Megillah and follow along in a chumash with every word. And if you missed a word from the Balkairei, you should read those words from the chumash. Or if you have the Megillah in front of you from the Megillah, read it to yourself. If you have the Megillah, you should read along with the Balkairei verbally. That way you make sure you don't miss a single word of the Megillah. And that way, if you miss the word, and the Balkairei is already ahead, you're not going to make that word after, and then the Megillah is out of order. But rather, in your own order, by yourself, you're saying the words of the Megillah. So it's good to follow along in a chumash, at least, or a Megillah. And if you miss the word, then you read the words from the chumash, because, like we said, you're allowed to say some of the words by heart. By heart means not from the Megillah. So from the chumash would be considered to be by heart, because you're not reading it from a valid handwritten Megillah on parchment. And then read fast and catch up to where the Balkairei is up to. And then from that point, continue listening from the Balkairei. There's also another novelty, another chiddush we learned from this Gemara. The whole problem, we said, that a person cannot listen to half the Megillah with the shul, with the minyan, with a big crowd, and then read half by himself. The problem was that he's doing it out of order. But there's no problem of the fact that we don't say that either the entire Megillah has to be read by yourself or the entire Megillah has to be heard. Because there's two different things in halacha. One is called shomea ka'ina. I hear something and I say amen after, or I'm listening to it on yotze, like kiddush. And one is that I'm saying it by myself. I'm not relying on someone else to fulfill my obligation. So you might think to yourself that I can't, when I'm doing a mitzvah or a bracha, it has to be the whole thing. Either entirely I hear it from someone else, or entirely by myself, not half-half. From our Gemara, we see that you are allowed to do half-half in certain things.
So what happens is that if actually the Balkairei missed the word,
no, if you missed hearing a word from the Balkairei, then you should read it from the Chumash and then continue reading until you catch up to where the Balkairei is up to. There's halakha by benching. If you have three people sitting together, but none of them know how to bench the whole entire benching. One of them only knows the first bracha, one of them only knows the second bracha, one of them only knows the third bracha.
They're strange people. guys.
I don't know, one of them went to camp when they were learning, I don't know. So then each one should say the bracha they know out loud, and the other ones should listen, and then the say they fulfill their obligation. So, meaning the part of it they were saying, the part of it they were listening, and they're all Yotze, they all fulfill their obligation. However, if you thought that was strange, the next case that they brought down in Shulchan Aruch is if one of them knows only the first half of the bracha, and one of them only knows the second half of the bracha. So then they cannot say, then they cannot do each one a half a bracha, because an entire bracha has to be either in a way of shemei ka'ina, listening and fulfilling your obligation, or reading it. What they should do then in that case is that one says a bracha, the half that they know, and the other one repeats it after them, after him or her. And then when they come to the other half, they switch. The other one says it, and the other one repeats it. And that way they both said the entire bracha. So for a bracha itself, a blessing, you cannot divide in half between shemei ka'ina and kriya, between saying it by yourself and listening. However, a full bracha, like benching, if three different brachas, that you could split up. So the Megillah, we're learning from the Bais over here, Megillah is not considered to be one, it's not like one long aliyah in the Torah or one verse, one pasuk, although we say a bracha before the Megillah, it does not make the Megillah one entity. You are allowed to split up the Megillah between reading and listening. And we've seen many times where there's someone reads the first half of the Megillah and then listens the second half of the Megillah, and they switch off, with someone else to read the second half. Obviously preferable to read along, but even if they don't, they're still Yotze because it does not have this. The entire Megillah does not have the status of a single bracha. But rather, you could make a chiluk, you can make a separation between listening to parts of the Megillah and reading parts of the Megillah.
So it sounds like from what I heard,
Yeah.
you could be in shul for more than half the Megillah, and that something emergency comes up, read, and then read from a Chumash the part, the rest. It sounds.
So it depends. It depends from where it's up to. You have to hear the Megillah from a kosher Megillah.
Yeah.
As long as it's a minority, and the very end of the Megillah, you also have to hear from a kosher Megillah. We'll have later on this Amud, it will bring about the beginning and the end of the Megillah are the exceptions to the rule. It's in the middle of the Megillah where you could hear it by heart. Sure.
Benching, what's the minimum? What's the bracha where you can be Yotze but not finish?
So the three blessings. One is Baruch Atah Hashem Hazanas Hakol. The second one is from Noidilcha and it ends Baruch Atah Hashem Al Aretz V'Al Hamazon. Next one starts Rachem and it ends off Bonei V'Racham Yerushalayim. Amen. You could, if someone comes to your house and they don't know how to bench, you bench out loud. They're Yotze. They fulfill their obligation.
So if you're in a hurry or something, you can say those three and.
No, you should say the whole thing. The fourth blessing, the fourth bracha continues, and it's a rabbinical bracha, not a biblical bracha, because it goes to Elamai Chasreinu. If you're really in a big rush, so then you should still bench the entire benching, but at least the first bracha till the end, from Baruch Atah to Hazanas Hakol, say it in the place where you finish benching, and then do the rest while you're going. If one is in a big rush, not ideal, but the first bracha, the first blessing must be done in the place where you're at. That's. Usually we don't say Amen after our own bracha, right? But we do that after the bracha of Bonei V'Racham Yerushalayim. We say Amen because we want to make a difference. Until now is the biblical brachas, and one made until by Moshe, by Yeshua, David, and Shlomo, and then the last part is by the Sanhedrin. Avinu Malkeinu Odeinu Bareinu. So in order to make a difference between the biblical and the rabbinical, you say the word Amen. We answer Amen after the third bracha. Bonei V'Racham Yerushalayim, and we say Amen after our own bracha.
I have a question. As far as the Chabad, she meant like when you're having the benching on the coast.
Yeah.
So do you after Ali feel free to put down the coast, or is it in Chabad, you know, you still have to hold the coast until you come all the way to the end of benching?
We actually put down the kos after Bonei V'Racham of Yerushalayim, Amen. After the biblical
Before.
brachos, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's when we usually put down the kos.
It's-
So if you see an interesting meme on the screen, this guy died a horrible death. Well, the one I meant to put was a different one, for not forwarding the message that he got to 10 people. I don't know if you ever got these. You get a message and it says you must forward this to 10 people. If you do, you'll be blessed, and if you don't, you're going to die a horrible death.
A chain letter. Yeah.
Chain letter.
Yeah.
Right, this is Ira's usually, this is usually Ira's department to put up these memes on the screen. So it's a meme, but it's not something new that was invented in the advent of social media. It was already around a long time ago. And what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to read a little bit from a story that happened. And it's very connected to this thing, and it's connected to this week's Parsha. And no better time to do it now when the world is in such turmoil as it is right now. The Rebbe one time, when first the Rebbe said about this, let me just bring this up on the screen. I'm not sure, I'm going to do a new share. I'm not sure if you can see it. Now you can see it. The Chida and the Radak. Chida is of Chaim Yosef David Azulai, Radak of David Kimchi. They both lived in the 300 to 500 years ago. The Rebbe one time spoke how he received a letter. This is in Shabbos Parshas Lech Lecha. So just like this week's Parsha. Lech Lecha was on Zayin Cheshvan in the year 1985. Tafshin Memvav. And the Rebbe spoke over there how he received, the Rebbe received, of course, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands over the years, definitely millions of letters. And one of these letters, the Rebbe would open every letter himself. The Rebbe would not let the secretaries open it, and the Rebbe also would not even allowed to have an envelope opener in his office. Maybe we'll get into the story behind that one time. But the Rebbe says, the people write to me letters and they seal the envelope with their tears. And I'm going to use a machine to open it. Right? The Rebbe would open every letter himself. And unfortunately, there's, of course, some people who, took advantage of that fact. And they would send, there was no sense from what comes into the Rebbe. Everything would go into the Rebbe. And there was a woman who wrote to the Rebbe like this. And she says, I received a letter in the mail. This is in the year 1985. And the letter said like this, that the Rebbe says it doesn't make a difference what it said. The letter was full of shtusim, full of nonsense. But the letter said that you must forward this letter to 10 people. If you forward this letter to 10 people, you're going to get lots of blessings and whatever. Life will be good for you. If you don't forward this letter to 10 people, so then you're going to die a horrible death. So she's all worried. She's very nervous about what this letter she received. And so she asked the Rebbe, she wrote a letter into the Rebbe, what should I do about it? And she sent the letter into the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, for sure, I told this lady, there's nothing to worry about. Take the letter, rip it up. And you don't have to worry about this at all. That's what the Rebbe told her. However, the Rebbe says, you have to take everything in the world happens for a reason, for Hashgacha Pratis. Rebbe says the one who wrote that letter wrote shtus and wrote nonsense. They wrote that this happened, it's worked for many, many people. That if they sent the letter out to 10 more people, they were successful. If they didn't send it out, they had a horrible punishment. But the letter writer did not sign their name. And obviously, there's nothing, the Rebbe told her to forget about it. Because Yirmiyahu says that if there are signs in Shemayim, Jewish people do not have to be scared of it. Even if heavens, the astrologers see for real, something bad could happen to a Jewish person, it doesn't apply to them because we're above all this. So nothing to worry about, the Rebbe told her. But the Rebbe says like this, I thought to myself, I don't know this woman. She doesn't know me. She only heard about the Rebbe and realized that the Rebbe could give her advice on this dilemma of hers. So if that's the case, the Rebbe says, that this comes to me, there must be a reason, a purpose for this in Kedusha and holiness. Every single thing in the world must be used for Kedusha. Everything in the world was only created, for example, for Hashem. It says the world was not worthy of having gold. Gold is such a precious object. And the only reason Hashem created it was that it should be used in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash. Otherwise, the world is not worthy of having gold. That means, for 26 generations until the Mishkan was built, almost 2,500 years of creation, 2,449 years of creation, 48 years of creation, there was gold in the world. Gold was used predominantly for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. But still, it was worth it because the ultimate purpose of the gold will come about. That it should be used for Kedusha, for holiness, for the Beis HaMikdash. So even something which is being used negatively for the longest time is only, the real purpose of it is to be used for Kedusha, for holiness. And if you can't find a way to how it could be used for holiness, break your head and figure it out how it could be done. So in a similar sense, we see this idea of a letter, which a person wrote the letter, demanded you forward it to 10 people, and demand that you write to those 10 people that they have to forward it to 10 people to make a chain reaction. We have the opportunity to use it for Kedusha, for holiness. And the Rebbe was speaking in Fabringen before that point about people write to the Rebbe wanting to understand, Rebbe, why are you making such a big deal about Mashiach? I mean, these people have to pay attention, more kavanah and davening. Most of the brachas in Shemini Esrei are asking for Mashiach. Bring us back our judges, bring a Beis HaMikdash, we should shuv Chol go to the Shachris, Mincha Maya 3 times a day. Most of your brachas in Shemini Esrei are about Mashiach. You go to Tikach HaTzois, the whole thing is on Masai, you say it many times, when Mashiach come. So many parts of our Yiddishkeit are involved around Mashiach. But I guess some people are getting uncomfortable. Why constantly remind people, we want Mashiach now, we need Mashiach, wait patiently. Wait, why demand it? You're telling Hashem what to do? If somebody has a health issue, they're going to ask Hashem. But for Mashiach. So the Rebbe responded by this Fabringen, by quoting from the Radak of David Kimchi, who lived, I think, 500 years ago, and the Chida, about the same time period, Chaim Yosef David Azulai. Quoting them too, which I brought it up on the screen, and I can forward it to everybody in here, Mirz Hashem, because it says forward it to 10 people. I'll forward it to at least these 10 people. And the Rebbe says you should use out this to Kedusha, the holiness. Forward this to 10 people, and then those 10 people shall forward it further to 10 people, and they should in turn write a letter to 10 people further. Use it out for Kedusha in a holy way. Don't worry, you won't get punished if you don't do it. And you'll definitely get brachas for doing it, for spreading Torah. These two parts of the Chida, these two quotes, one from the Chida and one from the Radak, about how it's incumbent on us to demand Mashiach. Not just wait passively around for Mashiach, demand Mashiach. And to print it in as many newspapers as possible. And the Rebbe says, don't do it in the name of Chabad, in the name of Lubavitch. Because many people are going to not want to if the Yitzhar is going to find a way to discount it if it's in the name of Lubavitch. Do it not in the name of Lubavitch. And the Rebbe also said, I know there's what's called the Spitz Chabad. You could say the overzealot ones who they're going to want to write to a lot more than 10 people. The Rebbe says, write to only 10 people and not more, because don't spend your time writing letters. Rather, spend your time learning Torah. If you're forwarding, maybe forward to more than 10 people, because that's easy. So we're going to learn these two quotes, one from the Chida, one from the Radak. I brought it up here on the screen. But how it's incumbent on us not just to want Mashiach and to know he's coming and to hope for him, but demand from Hashem Mashiach. As Chafetz Chaim said, there's a mitzvah that a boss has to pay his employee on the same day. But if they don't ask for their wages, then there's no lav, there's no prohibition on the owner. The owner does not necessarily must give their wages unless the employee demands and asks it from the owner. So it says Mashiach is a reward for everything we did during Galus. For the result, we have to demand it from Hashem. Chafetz Chaim writes that. So we're going to learn these two quotes, one from the Chida and one from the Radak. We see every single thing that happens in the world is for a purpose. So first we'll do the Chida. In the Sefer Midbar Kedemus. Amru biyako tilim reishim zayin tashlam mirvav afilu ein biyad Yisrael ela akivoy kedai heim legula b'schar akivoy. The Yalkut Tehillim, a Medrash on Tehillim says, if the only merit, if the Jews had no merits and did everything wrong, Averis in the time of Galus, and the only schus they had only merit they had, that they hoped for Mashiach, they waited for Mashiach, so then Mashiach will come just in that one schus, that they hope for Mashiach. V'zeh Pirush Rav Gadol Rav Yosef David, as the Chida writes, Matbeya bracha, we say the bracha in Shemona Esrei. Et samach David abdecha, mehiras asmiach, right? Et samach David abdecha mehiras asmiach, v'karnei torm lishosecha, kilishrosecha kevinu kol yom. Speedily cause the offspring of David HaMelech, which is Mashiach, your servant, to flourish. We hope for your salvation, kol hayom, the entire day. Like we just learned this 2 weeks ago when we're going through the brachas of Shemona Esrei, rather before Yom Tov. Who says we wait for your salvation, kol hayom, not every day, but kol hayom, the entire day. We're waiting for Mashiach to come. We say that in Shemona Esrei. If someone has kavanah, pay attention. You made a bracha with Hashem's name. They're waiting for Mashiach not just to come every day, but the entire day. What type of reasoning is this? We says, may Mashiach come speedily very soon, because we have hoped for your salvation the whole day. The reason why he should come is because we hope for him? Is that the reason he should come? No other reason? What happens if we didn't hope for him? Why mention hope? If we know if we're not worthy of Mashiach coming, then why should he come, even if we're hoping for him? Rather, the answer is, Hachi Purusha, says a Chida. It's Semach David. This is what the answer is. Even if we are unworthy from where we're standing, in our spiritual standing, from Mashiach to come, still bring Mashiach. Katzmiach, Mashiach should sprout. He l'shawascha kivinu, yeshlanu akivoy, because of the one merit we do have, which is waiting and hoping and waiting for Mashiach. And that hope alone is sufficient for Mashiach to come. And these are the Anshe Knesset Meggilah, when they composed Shemona Esrei, already put that in. It's enough for Mashiach to come just in the merit that we're hoping for him, without any other skusim or merits whatsoever. It's a marvelous thing. That should give a very big boost for everyone hoping for Mashiach. And then we're going to learn the Radak, Rab David Timchi. He brings in Shmuel-Beis, the end of Shmuel-Beis, it brings the story of David HaMelech near the end of his life, when he bought Yerushalayim. He bought the place of the Beis HaMikdash from a Ravna HaYevusi. It was a threshing floor for someone named Aravna, And he bought it from this person because there was a mizbeach inside already that was made by Noach and by Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov. And the reason why he bought it was because there was a plague going on among the Jewish people. And every day, 100 Jewish men were dying. You know, it's sort of like the COVID, which happened back then. And David HaMelech asked by Urim Ritumim what to do. He asked by the high priest. He asked from Hashem what to do. And two things were enacted then. Three things. One of them was that David HaMelech bought this land, the threshing floor, the place of the future Beis HaMikdash, and he brought Karbanis there. He also instituted that every Jew should say 100 brachas, 100 blessings every single day. And then the Meggilah, the plague stopped. And it says, David asked Hashem, Vayetar Hashem la'aretz, and Hashem was entreated for the land. V'teyatzar Meggilah me'al Yisrael, and then the plague stopped. So David HaMelech, he brought the karban, the offering to Hashem, in the place of the future Beis HaMikdash, and he entreated Hashem for the land of Eretz Yisrael. And then the Meggilah, the plague, stayed away from the Jews. Uvidrash kol alafim ha'eleh shenaflu mei David le'naflu alei they shall tavu Beis HaMikdash. The Medrash says like this: the reason why so many people died during the time of David HaMelech is because now that they had a Jewish king, and now there's no more wars with the Pelishtim, with their enemies, the Philistines, the Jewish people should have been demanding the Beis HaMikdash to be built already. And they didn't. They were sort of happy with the status quo, that the Beis HaMikdash, that the Aron was in a temporary lodgings, and they were happy with the status quo. Meaning the Shiloh was destroyed. They had persecution for 52 years almost from the Philistines. And now they were happy, meaning they were satisfied. They weren't demanding the Beis HaMikdash to be built. And that's why so many thousands of Jews died in a plague during the time of Beis HaMelech, because they did not demand the Beis HaMikdash. And this leads to a kal v'chomer, a learning that, meaning definitely, if something applies in one case, it could definitely apply in the other case. The Jews during the time of David HaMelech never yet had a Beis HaMikdash, because the first Beis HaMikdash was not yet built. It was only built later on during the time of Shlomo. And was not destroyed during their days. Naflu, the reason why so many Jews died in the plague was because they did not demand the Beis HaMikdash. So us, we already had a Beis HaMikdash. In our days, meaning not during our lifetime, but at least in our history at this point, we had a Beis HaMikdash, and it was destroyed. And also, Maimer Chazal, it says, if the Beis HaMikdash was not built in your days, it's as if it was destroyed in your days. Imagine Beis HaMikdash being destroyed in front of your eyes. Al achas kama v'kama. So most definitely, how much we must demand the Beis HaMikdash. Lefikach, therefore, hiskinu hiskenim u'neviim lita b'piyim shel Yisrael lius mispalim shlosha pa'amim b'chol yom. Therefore, our elders and the Nevi'im and the prophets instituted that we should daven 3 times a day out loud. Bring back your Shechina, your presence, and your kingship to Tzion, to Yerushalayim. And the service of the Beis HaMikdash to Yerushalayim. Amen. Ken Yiratz and Sela. May it be your will very soon. These things, you're supposed to read it, learn it, which you just did, and forward it to 10 people. Because our demands for Mashiach must be verbally heard. The Jews in the times of David HaMelech did not sufficiently demand the Beis HaMikdash, and that's why, unfortunately, there was a plague then. So by us, we must definitely demand the Beis HaMikdash, because we already had it once. And if the only thing we have The only merit is hoping for the Beis Hamikdash and hoping for Mashiach. That is already sufficient merit for Mashiach to come. And these were written by great people, the Chida and the Radak from previous generations. So the Rebbe says, if you're asking me why I'm urging about Mashiach, those people have never yet learned this Chida, this Radak. And therefore, to take a lesson from everything that happens, the Rebbe says, you should definitely, whoever could, should learn it, of course, and forward it to 10 people. So, I'll forward it to everyone as part of our group. That's at least 10. And if everyone could, definitely. But now, it was said, this was said on the Farbrengen of Parshas Lech Lecha in the year Tashrin Memvav, 1985. So, Zayin Cheshvan. So, something that's this week.
Two parts. The hope from the Mashiach and then demand.
Right.
You got to hope and then realize demand.
Right. One is hoping and one is demanding.